are brown, and the sky is gray.
In a coffee house, Sebastian.
You were on the radio, humming without even realizing it. That soft, almost hypnotic voice was singing about dreams, faraway places, and freedom. And for a few minutes, it felt like anything was possible. The Mamas and the Papas didn't just soundtrack an era, they defined it. But what most people don't know is that behind every perfect harmony, there were deep, open wounds. In this video, you're going to discover how one of the biggest bands of the 1960s conquered the world and tore itself apart from within. Stick around until the end, because this isn't just a story about music. It's about everything that can go wrong, even when it seems like you have it all. In the early 1960s, the music scene in the US was undergoing a quiet revolution. Folk music dominated the cafes of New York and the airwaves of college radio stations. In the middle of it all, a young guitarist named John Phillips was trying to make a name for himself. John came from a musical family and had an almost obsessive pursuit of perfection. Alongside friends Scott McKenzie and Dick Weissman, he formed the Journeymen, a folk trio focused on tight vocal harmonies and socially conscious lyrics. In a world where Bob, Dylan, and Peter, Paul, and Mary were leading the charge, they were trying to carve out their own space. They recorded 3 albums and played at key clubs in Greenwich Village. Critics appreciated them, but mainstream success never came. John married Susan Adams, and they had a daughter, but everything changed when he met Michelle Gilliam, a 17-year-old model. John was 26. He fell for her instantly. Not long after, he divorced Susan and married Michelle. It was the start of a passionate story that would change his career forever. By 1964, traditional folk music was losing ground. The arrival of the Beatles and the full force of the British invasion were transforming the industry. Electric guitars were replacing banjos, and gentle harmonies were being overtaken by energy and distortion. Folk had to evolve or die. That's when folk rock emerged, blending the lyrical depth of folk with the drive and rhythm of rock. The Byrds and Simon and Garfunkel were leading the charge. The Journeymen failed to adapt and broke up, but John Phillips wasn't ready to give up. He knew that to survive in the new music world, he had to modernize his sound without losing his core identity, and he had a plan. With his new wife Michelle by his side, John began working on a more ambitious idea. They wanted a group with complex vocal harmonies, but with a sound that felt fresher, more pop, more current. They drew inspiration from Electric Dylan, the Byrds, and everything that was exploding out of Los Angeles. To bring this vision to life, John reached out to an old friend, Denny Doherty, a Canadian singer with a warm, powerful voice. Denny was the perfect fit for the kind of harmonies they had in mind. He joined them, and together they formed the new Journeymen. They worked hard, but the breakthrough still didn't come. Something was missing. That something was Cass Elliot. Cass came from the same folk circle. She had a one-of-a-kind voice, rich and commanding, and a magnetic personality that filled any room. Denny knew her well and didn't hesitate to recommend her. But John didn't want her in the group not because of her voice, but because of her appearance. She didn't fit the industry's narrow image standards, where looks mattered as much as talent. John resisted. Denny pushed. Michelle backed her too. In the end, Cass's voice was impossible to ignore. Her presence completely transformed the group's energy, and she brought something unexpected: their name. One day, while watching an interview with members of the Hells Angels, one of them mentioned they called their women mamas. With her usual humor, Cass shouted that she wanted to be Mama Cass. John shot back, "Then we'll be the Papas." And just like that, the Mamas and the Papas were born. Now, with a full lineup, the band had everything: the talent, the sound, the look, and finally, an identity. All they needed now was one song to put them on the map. That song was just around the corner, and it would change the course of music history forever. Now settled in Los Angeles, John, Michelle, Denny, and Cass went all in. They left behind New York, small clubs, and the folk circuit. California was the land of opportunity, and they had a secret weapon: a new song, written in the dead of a New York winter, inspired by Michelle's longing for the sunny skies of her home state. That song was called California Dreamin'. With the help of producer Lou Adler, co-founder of Dunhill Records, they scored an audition. The moment Adler heard them live, he knew he had struck gold. He offered them a contract on the spot. California Dreamin' was released in the 19th of December '65. From the opening's melancholic guitar to the flawless vocal harmonies and longing lyrics, it perfectly captured the mood of a generation young people searching for a different life, a different path. The song's success was immediate. California Dreamin' didn't just climb the charts, it became an anthem, a symbol of change, escape, and the California dream. But the wave didn't stop there. In March 1966, they released their second single, Monday, Monday. It didn't just match the momentum of their first hit, it surpassed it, becoming their only #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. With that, the Mamas and the Papas were no longer a promise, they were a phenomenon. Their debut album cemented the formula: rich harmonies, emotional lyrics, and a modern bohemian look. They had a strong visual style and in the 60s that sold just as much as the music. But while everything sparkled on the outside, things inside were starting to crack. Cass Elliot was deeply in love with Denny Doherty. Though she never said it out loud, everyone knew. They shared a special connection, but he didn't feel the same. The real issue? Denny had fallen for Michelle John's wife. Michelle and Denny began a secret affair. They met in secret on tour, during rehearsals, even in recording sessions. It was a ticking time bomb, and eventually, it exploded. When the truth came out, the group was left fractured. Cass was heartbroken, not just because of unrequited love, but because of the emotional betrayal she felt. John was furious. He had left his first wife for Michelle. He had put everything on the line for her, and now, his friend and bandmate had betrayed him. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but the worst was yet to come. Michelle hadn't just been involved with Denny. She had also gotten involved with a member of the Byrds, the band John deeply admired, the ones who had inspired him to reshape his music. For him, it was the final straw. Despite their success, the group's internal dynamic was unsustainable. In June 1966, Michelle was officially kicked out of the band. She was replaced by Jill Gibson, a talented singer and photographer, but she didn't fit in. The audience didn't accept her. The chemistry was gone. A breakup seemed inevitable, but the band wasn't ready to DNO yet. Michelle came back. Not because everyone forgave her, but because without her, the Mamas and the Papas just weren't the same. The reunion was tense, but necessary. There was still one last shot, one more chance. And it would come in the form of an event that would change the history of rock forever. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because trust me, what's coming next is worth it. After Michelle returned, the band tried to move forward as if nothing had happened, but everyone knew that was impossible. The trust was broken. Tension filled every rehearsal, every recording session, every interview. John Phillips became increasingly controlling. He was a perfectionist, obsessed with every note, every harmony, every word. He wanted everything to sound flawless. But that level of pressure started to suffocate the rest of the group. The pressure was constant. Denny turned to alcohol. Cass, though still a shining presence on stage, carried the emotional weight of her unrequited love. Michelle tried to keep up appearances, but her relationship with John was just a facade. What had once been passion was now a cold war. Still, they kept going. And in the middle of the chaos, John came up with a plan to regain some of the control he had lost. Not with a song, but with an event. Alongside Lou Adler, he organized the Monterey Pop Festival. It was an ambitious idea to bring together the most important bands of the moment and position the Mamas and the Papas as a cultural force. Not just a musical one. It was 1967, and the hippie movement was in full bloom. As part of the festival, John wanted to include an old friend, Scott McKenzie, his former bandmate from the Journeymen. He wrote a song specifically for the event. It was called San Francisco. Be sure to wear flowers in your hair. The song was a success. It became the second anthem of the counterculture, right behind California Dreamin'. Scott re-emerged as a public figure, and John, for a moment, felt like he had recaptured some of his magic. But the festival was a bittersweet victory for the band. Their performance at Monterey was one of the festival's closing acts. Expectations were high. People anticipated something historic. But what they delivered was a tense, uncoordinated, almost forced performance. The audience noticed. So did the critics. New talents like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and The Who were stealing the spotlight. The energy had shifted. The Mamas and the Papas were no longer seen as the future. They were a band struggling to stay relevant in a world that was moving faster every day. Even so, they released a new album, The Mamas and the Papas Deliver. It included songs like Dedicated to the One I Love and Creek Alley, a kind of musical autobiography, recounting their story, their beginnings, their connections, their conflicts. It was a way to look in the mirror and admit they were no longer the same, but not even the music could cover what was happening behind the scenes. The arguments got worse. The passion was gone. Substance use became routine, especially for Denny, who drank to get through the tours, the rehearsals, and the guilt. In 1968, Cass Elliot had enough. She decided to leave the band and start a solo career. Her departure marked the true end. They were no longer a band, just four people dragging along a project that had died long ago. They still had contractual obligations, so in 1971, they released one final album, People Like Us. No one asked for it. No one celebrated it. They only did it to fulfill the contract. And with that, the Mamas and the Papas officially came to an end. After the group disbanded, each member went their own way. But none of them could fully leave behind the weight of what they had lived through. Cass Elliot was the first to reinvent herself. Her voice was simply too powerful to disappear. She launched a solo career and quickly found success. Her natural charisma made her a beloved figure, both with audiences and her fellow artists. But her personal life wasn't easy. The insecurity she carried before the group remained, magnified by excess and the pressure of the industry. In July 1974, while in London, Cass died of a heart attack. She was only 32 years old. Her death was a major blow to the music world and to those who knew her. She had been the soul of the group, the one who gave the most, and perhaps the one who suffered the most. John Phillips, the group's sonic architect, tried to stay in the industry. He released a solo album and took part in a few musical projects, but he never managed to reconnect with the public the way he had in the 60s. His later years were marked by addiction and personal conflicts that pulled him further from the spotlight. In 1998, the Mamas and the Papas were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was a late but well-deserved recognition. 3 years later, in March 2001, John died of a heart attack. He left behind a complicated legacy, musically brilliant, personally conflicted. Michelle Phillips, on the other hand, found her second act in acting. She left the stage behind and settled in Hollywood, where she built a solid career in film and television. She was the only member who remained in the public eye for decades, successfully reinventing herself. Her presence in pop culture extended far beyond music. Denny Doherty continued making music, although in a more low-key fashion. He also explored theater and television, and released a solo album. He never stopped creating, but he also never reached the level of visibility he had with the band. In January 2007, he passed away from complications related to kidney failure. With his death, Michelle became the only surviving member of the group, the only one who witnessed the rise, the fall, and the legacy of one of the most iconic bands of the 1960s. Even though their active career lasted only a few years, the Mamas and the Papas left a deep mark. Not just because of their songs, but because of everything they stood for. They were part of a cultural shift, a social awakening, a generation that wanted something different. Now I want to know what you think. Did you know this story? Do you have a favorite song from the group? Do you think they could have lasted longer if things had been different? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip through time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a beat. See you in the next video where music lives on forever.